Hello everyone, let's do some right triangle trig review. This is the basic stuff here. First thing, let me just remind you that if I'm talking about this 50-degree angle, you need to know the sides of a triangle. So across from that, the one that this angle opens up to form, this is called the opposite side of the angle. And then the other thing you should always be aware of is across from 90 degrees, this is always the hypotenuse. Okay, so the only one left here is the adjacent side. If you're talking about 50 degrees and I say what is adjacent to 50, that's the one that's next to it, that's not the hypotenuse. And the one that it opens up to form is called the opposite side. Now, similarly, if I come over here and I say, hey, what about this angle, which has to be 40 degrees, because remember they have to add it to 180. Opposite is here now. So it's when we say opposite and adjacent, it's opposite of an angle. It's opposite of something. It's relative to something. This is still the hypotenuse, but this would then be adjacent side. So you need to decide what angle you're working with before you decide what's the opposite side. It's opposite of what? In this problem, I have to first decide which trig function I'm going to use. Let me just remind you, we have this little trick we use called SOHCAHTOA. And if that doesn't mean anything to you, then it's not super helpful. The sine of an angle is opposite over hypotenuse. So sine is opposite hypotenuse. So, and then we do cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So CAH, cosine is adjacent hypotenuse. And then the last one you're going to need to know is tangent of an angle is opposite over adjacent. Oops, ADJ, adjacent, okay? You have to first decide which trig function you're going to use. And you have your calculator to help you actually type the calculations in. You're not going to do any arithmetic, but you need to know which trig function you're going to use for these problems. In this problem, if I'm using 50 degrees here, then this would be the adjacent side and this would be the hypotenuse. So adjacent and hypotenuse, I'm going to write an equation. The cosine of 50 degrees is adjacent over hypotenuse. And to solve this equation, you want to get x by itself. To undo dividing by 6.1, you multiply both sides by 6.1. So this one would be, in my calculator, make sure you're in degrees, 6.1 cosine 50, 3.92. Nearest tenth, 3.9. X equals 3.9. I don't know what the units are, so I'll just leave it as 3.9. One quick thing to remember, the hypotenuse should always be the longest side. So if I would have gotten like 7 there, I'd be like, that's wrong. The hypotenuse has to be the longest side. So just make sure that this makes sense. 3.9 is less than 6.1. We're good. Let's try another one. For 31 degrees, we're looking at the side that is opposite. And then this is opposite 90, so this must be the hypotenuse. So opposite and hypotenuse is sine. The sine of 31 is x over 95. And like the other one, you're going to multiply both sides by 95. So 95 times the sine of 31 is 48.9. X equals 48.9. Cool. Okay. That's it for finding sides. Now, the only thing that might mess you up is if I move the variable. So this is going to be, let's see, obviously this is the hypotenuse because it's across from 90. This is the adjacent side. So we're saying adjacent and hypotenuse. The cosine of 48 is 4.5 over x. You do need to be careful here. Most of the time people think of this as a proportion. You're going to cross multiply. 4.5 times 1 equals x cosine 48. But what's different is when you solve this now, you divide both sides by the cosine of 48. So you're actually going to type it in differently. You're going to say 4.5 divided by the cosine of 48. If the variable is in the denominator, you can flip these and just say 4.5 divided by cosine, and you get 6.7. X equals 6.7, which is bigger than 4.5. It's the hypotenuse. It should be. Another one like that. Let's see, opposite and hypotenuse. So sine of 26 is 6.5 over x. Since the x is in the denominator, you need to make sure that you divide. 6.5 divided by sine of 26. 14.8. So x equals 14.8. Cool. Okay. So sometimes you multiply both sides. If the variable is in the top, you undo by multiplying here. If the variable is in the bottom, you divide. And the last thing, finding the missing angles, is pretty much the same game. You decide which trig function you want to use. Here, this is opposite and hypotenuse, so I'll say the sine of x is 20 over 37. But then you're like, how do I get that x out of there? I need to flip the inputs and the outputs. And you guys have done this a bunch of times in this class. When we flip the inputs and the outputs, that's called the inverse function. So if you type this in your calculator using the inverse button, see this right here? Sign to the negative first, that's saying inverse sign. Inverse sign of 20 over 37 will give you the angle. And the angle is 32.7 degrees. 32.7 degrees. One more, this is also a sine problem, opposite and hypotenuse. So the sine of x is 9.8 over 18. But again, since I want to figure out what the angle is, the inverse sine of 9.8 over 18 will give you x. So when you type it in, you use inverse sine. 9.8 divided by 18, and I get 32 point, that'll round up to 33 degrees. X equals 33 degrees. Cool. Okay, so finding missing sides, finding missing angles should not be that big of an ask for you. You guys should be able to knock out your spiral review, and make sure you smash that like and subscribe.